This is the Career Foundation's Future at Work podcast and web series with our host, Evelyn Akselrod, as she explores critical topics affecting the workforce and workplace. Each episode, we focus on new and emerging trends across high-growth industries, including technology, sales and services, healthcare, finance, and the skilled trades. Visit us at www.careerfoundation.com to learn more.
So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the Career Foundation's Future at Work webinar and podcast series. My name is Evelyn Akselrod with the Career Foundation, and today we're kicking off the first of a three-part equity series looking at diversity and inclusion in the workplace and the workforce. So I am thrilled today to be joined by a special team of Accenture employees who each lead an area of inclusion and diversity in their workplace. It intersects somehow with the work that they do. I have with me Gwenna Kadima, Rosie Given, Patricia Poon, and Emily Bolton. Welcome all of you, and thank you for joining me.
Hi there, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. So before we jump into all of the learning, I'd love for each of you to sort of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you. Who wants to get started?
I can kick us off. So thank you, Evelyn. So my name is Gwenna Kadima. I am a consulting analyst based out of Accenture's Toronto office. I've been with Accenture for about 2 years now, and I'm soft aligned to our talent and organization practice. So my work is predominantly around the focus of creating inclusive spaces using technology where employees can bring their best selves to work. And above and beyond that, I am extremely passionate about the work that I do for inclusion and diversity with Accenture. I am one of the co-founders as well as the National Recruitment Programs lead for BOLD, which is Accenture Canada's Black Employee Resource Group. Really happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. Patricia.
Sure, thanks. Hi, my name is Patricia, or Pat. The pronouns is she and her. I am a digital consultant here at Accenture, based out of Toronto as well. I've been here just about 3 years plus an internship. As a digital consultant, I coordinate teams to design, build, test, and just release products that are also inclusive for everyone who uses them. In terms of the ERG, I am the Canada Pride Recruiting Lead, and I've been so for about 3 years as well. And I'm involved in organizing LGBTQ plus employee events as well as partnership events throughout North America.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Rosie, we'll go to you.
Sure, my name is Rosie Given. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm our I&D recruiting lead for Accenture Canada. Also based out of our Toronto office. I've been with Accenture now for almost 4 years, after 7 years in the campus recruiting world, and excited to be making some progress in the inclusion space now with Accenture. So very happy to be here too.
Fantastic. Okay, and last but never least, Emily.
Hi there, I'm Emily Bolton. I am part of our global I&D Center of Expertise, where I focus primarily on our gender programming, but have worked very closely with our team in Canada for a number of years now. I've been with Accenture for 10 years, and I spent most of that time actually working with our clients in our consulting business, and in the last couple of years have kind of shifted my career to focus more on our people and how we make a difference for our people's experiences. So I'm excited to be here today and talk to you a bit more about what we do.
Yes, I love that, and I love the fact that our people is so important in the work that we do, and it is a reflection of the work we do externally. So I love that. And so one of the reasons why many of our listeners might want to know why Accenture, and I have to say that I was so excited to learn that Accenture was named number one in the world for a diverse and inclusive work environment for 2 years, once by Thomson Reuters and the other by Refinitiv Diversity and Inclusion Index. And so that was in 2018 and 19. And I thought, who better to learn from than from the best, and people who are working in the sector, but working across the world. And so I'd love to know a little bit more about Accenture's journey and its path to becoming the #1 diverse employer workplace in the world. How did that become a priority? How did the diversity become a priority at Accenture?
I can start, and guys, feel free to jump in as well. I think, this has been a focus for Accenture for a number of years now. Like a lot of organizations, we started off and it's a journey. And I think you'll probably hear us all talk about that a lot. And anyone who works in this space would say that this is a journey, and we're absolutely still on that journey. Like a lot of organizations, we started off talking about gender and gender diversity, but very quickly, and certainly now, we have really expanded the way we think about diversity to the broadest possible sense that we can have of that. So yes, gender, but also gender expression, sexual orientation, gender identity, and also thinking about and starting to think beyond as well to ethnicity and cross-cultural diversity. We talk about mental health a lot. We think about enablement and really any other form of diversity that you can think of, whether that be age or country of origin or all sorts of things, right? So we know that diversity is much more complex, and that really the intersectionality between all those identities is also a really big piece of how we think about it. But that is a journey that we've been on, and that we've kind of evolved over the years as we've started to talk and think about I&D really carefully in our organization. I think that when I look at our journey, I think what stands out to me a lot about it is how data-driven it's been and how driven by research as well. So we do our own research in the market around inclusion and diversity, and we use that research not just to talk to our clients about it, but actually kind of turn that back on ourselves and shape and drive our own decisions and what we do for our own organization and our people. So I think there are kind of 4 big pieces of that that is really driven by research and the way in which we think about inclusion and diversity. And the first one is around leadership and bold leadership. So making sure that we have, and we really do have, strong and visible commitments from the very top of our organization for inclusion and diversity. And that comes from, our global CEO, Julie Sweet, but all the way down through to our Canadian business, our frontline leaders as well. In Canada, that commitment is really clear and visible. We are transparent about that as well. So we do everything we can to make sure those goals that we have are visible to our people and also externally. And we do it because we know it's the right thing to do, but we also do it because we know it's good for business. There's a really strong business case for having strong, diverse, inclusive teams that perform better. So it's really kind of part of what we know we bring to our clients as well. I think the next piece along from there is thinking about it in terms of comprehensive action. So we look at inclusion and diversity as needing to integrate into every stage of our employee life cycle, everything from recruitment, and I know Rosie can talk to us a lot about that piece, but through recruitment into retention and how we develop our employees and how they progress through our organization as well. We have that inclusion and diversity lens at every stage of the game. And then we also think, and I think this is for me almost the most important piece, is an empowering environment. So it's kind of the thread that ties everything together to say, how are we making sure that we are creating a place for our people that fosters a sense of belonging, where people can really come and demonstrate their unique value and be their authentic selves day to day when they come to work, because we know that's kind of that piece, that secret sauce that means that the diversity that we have in our organization actually enables us to thrive and kind of bring really cool, innovative ideas to our clients. And then the last piece that I think is really important, and I think even our conversation today is part of this, is we also think about our commitment to inclusion and diversity as connecting to outside of our organization as well. So whether that be with our clients or partnering with organizations in our communities to really use what we know and the power that we have and the information we have to affect change and positive progress in the communities that we live and work in as well. So I'll maybe pause there because I think I've had a lot to say, and I'm sure my colleagues would also have a few things they want to jump in as well.
Yeah,
Just listening.
I'd love to hear, and I've seen this a few times, that Accenture uses IND differently than a lot of other people do. Everyone talks about diversity and inclusion. Why is inclusion first in your the way you position it?
There is a TED Talk that we really like to quote and share. The TED Talk is called How to Overcome Our Biases, and it's by Verna Myers.
I love her.
And within the TED Talk, she does say diversity is being invited to the party, while inclusion is being asked to dance. So that, I think, very perfectly frames why Accenture is very conscious about putting the I before the D. A lot of other organizations, when we go to conferences, they'll always say D and I, because diversity is, ensuring that we're inviting the right people to our organization, and inclusion is, once they're here, making sure everyone is understood and heard and welcomed and respected and seen. So, both within Accenture teams and as well when we go to the clients, there's a very open dialogue about, are we building the right teams, that diverse teams that are delivering for our clients? And it's formalized in our growth model. We ensure we staff people from a variety of knowledge areas, backgrounds, technical, non-technical. And, I would say, just personally, as someone who is designing, building, launching technology for people, I can definitely say that these diverse teams have really, really allowed us to be more inclusive, have better features, taking into account, ability, language barriers, cultural understanding. When we're designing physical products, we take into account mobility. So for all those reasons, that's why we always put I before the D.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Pat, for talking about that. Me as a professional, I've always, and I think it's how I grew up too, always sort of separated the personal from the professional. And more I'm recognizing that everything we do is around the human experience, and you're designing for inclusion. We're working to bring the best out of each other, right? And so that's why that has to be central to what we do. Thanks for sharing that. So Accenture is a global brand. Emily, you're representing that global piece. And, from that perspective, there's so many countries looking at diversity very differently. We see that showing up in the news. We see, different cultures viewing diversity very differently. Tell me how, if you can, how was Accenture able to keep that central to the organization's identity when you're working across so many cultures and perspectives on diversity?
I think that because our commitment to I&D really does come from the very top of our organization, we really, I think, whatever country you work in, there is a mandate for this to be part of. This is a key business driver, a business measurement, and a business decision that every one of our leaders is held to, regardless of where they work in the world. But we also know that depending on where you work in the world, our cultures are different, the situation may be different, the things that are of most interest or greatest need to our people are going to change depending on where we're doing business and where they're located. So we really, while we have really strong global commitments, we also have localized teams whose role it is to really bring that to life where people live and work day to day. So as you said, I'm part of a global team that kind of looks programmatically across the organization at what we need to be working on. But then people like Rosie, for example, are in a local Canadian role that's really focused on recruitment in Canada and how we make sure we're bringing in the best candidates from the most diverse backgrounds as we can.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, again, people are central to this model. Taking care of them, we end up with the best of both worlds. We get the business outcomes and we get the people feeling good in their environment. So fantastic. Now, I think it was in Getting to Equal, that report that Accenture wrote, and I think, was it 2020 that it was released, Getting to Equal?
It's actually a series of research papers. So they began, I believe, in 2016. Most recently, our most recent chapter in that series was released in 2020, but there's been a series of other ones prior as well.
Yeah, so I think that was the 2020 report. I saw something about leaders and employees have very different perspectives about diversity and inclusion. And so it was interesting. I think it was something like 70% of leaders thought that they were, creating an inclusive environment where people felt that they belonged. And I think it was like 39-40% of employees felt that way. And there was a massive gap. And so it's interesting to see the way what leaders think that they're doing, but how people are actually experiencing it. And Accenture sort of leading the way in making sure that experience for both line up. So if we can get to know a little bit about what inclusion looks like inside your day-to-day work at Accenture.
Yeah, it's really great that you mentioned that, because the unique thing about Accenture, and I think what we try to do, is we have inclusion which is very heavily backed by central and global HR, and a central and global HR organization, but led and driven by local employees, as Emily mentioned before. So we've got to a point where we're not necessarily HR led, but HR supported. And at other companies we've met, our counterparts, the folks who run the ERGs, may sit in the HR organization, right? They have an HR role. But that's definitely not the case here. All of our local leaders and sponsors most of the time are also, managing directors, managers, consultants, analysts who are working on client projects and going to clients like, for example, I have my day job and my day job. So, Gwenna, did you want to talk a little bit about how we do our communications around inclusion, from the leadership down to the employee level?
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to see, because it really ties to what you're saying, Pat, in terms of it's across all of our levels. So we got more of the corporate function side of support as well as involvement, and then really having a lot of these initiatives and the strategy and the cultural impact being led by folks who are in the business. And we really see that we're getting it not only in the business, but across all of those different levels. And as a result of that, I feel like as an employee who's been with the firm for about 2 years, I'm really getting it from all angles. I'm hearing it on our client site when we're talking about, okay, how do we engage better with our project teams? We ensure that there's an inclusive space. We have inclusion and diversity task force at a lot of our major clients, and we're trying to build it across all. And even just the internal communications that we have. I can't think of a town hall that I've been to since I've joined that hasn't had some mention of I&D. And it's becoming even more robust and more robust as we find that our leaders and all of our employees are really learning. For example, the inclusion of land acknowledgements are really consistent for us. Folks are getting more comfortable bringing their pronouns into their personal introductions. And so there's just constantly, whether it's calendar moments, it's town halls, or just overall discussions, you're really getting that comprehensive view of inclusion and diversity. And I feel like it's a genuine thing that really transcends hierarchy and transcends level. And the other part that we've alluded to a bit, but is just really, I think our ERGs and our interest groups, our employee resource groups, are a huge portion of what really makes me feel so included and comfortable within the organization. And so just the number, I think, really speaks to sort of the maturity of how our ERGs are established. But we have 11 across Canada, and quiz me later on it if you'd like. But they are really diverse, and I love the opportunity that we have where it's not only folks who identify with these groups, say maybe the men's ERG, or for us with BOLD being our Black ERG. It's really a comprehensive space that also includes our allies and really creates meaningful dialogue, education, and just safe experiences on both sides of the table. And what I'm really loving to see, especially with the events that have really shaken the Black community over the summer, is that we're seeing a lot of an intersectional approach and a lot of solidarity across our ERGs. We're seeing collaborations where recently we talked about intersectionality, for example, a partnership between our Black ERG and our women's ERG. We hosted a media series on that. We've done some really great events with our mental health ERG, prioritizing our Black employees. And it's really taking this tangible approach because you really get the sense that folks are listening. There's a component of allyship as well as sponsorship and solidarity from our leaders, regardless of how they identify. And you see it at that macro scale, but also there's what I've really appreciated recently, this sense from the business of wanting to listen to the employees. And I've alluded to the events of the summer, but there was an acknowledgement of, like you mentioned, Evelyn, you've got your work self and your personal self. There's really been this merging of those two sides. And for example, the organization has sponsored for us to have continuing sessions, predominantly targeting our Black employees, with a registered psychotherapist who is also Black identifying, based in the Greater Toronto area, named Megan Watson. And she, since the middle of June, has come into the organization 4 separate times to really speak predominantly to our Black folks to discuss a variety of topics about our well-being and our self-care. We've talked about these really intense conversations on things like intergenerational trauma, racial trauma, emotional labor, and then practices for self-care and resiliency. And what I think is so amazing is that there's been space for this to be a dialogue that really prioritizes our Black population, but you're still seeing the participation of folks who identify in different ways, who really want to learn and support their peers and really create a caring environment. And Pat, I'm sure that you could speak a lot to as well what's happening from the Pride ERG. That was just one of 11.
I was just going to fully agree with everything Gwenna said. I mean, the Pride ERG is also, we've been partnering with BOLD as well, given what has been happening earlier this year, in terms of having a learning series and having a safe space for folks to show up and just talk about, how they've been feeling. And I also echo, everything that Gwenna is saying about our allyship program. We have a great allyship program. I believe we started in 2014. And of course, our Pride ERG itself is much older than that, but we formally started a Pride Ally program in 2014, which has, I think, been very helpful, and the feedback that we've heard has been very helpful in allowing folks to feel more inclusive at work, having visible allies who, either digitally visibly, so having a rainbow pin or rainbow signature, or, when we were in the office physically, visibly with a rainbow lanyard, those are, and we have programming that's, not only catered towards, as Gwenna said, our LGBTQ plus individuals themselves, but also a learning series for allies in terms of how they can keep learning and keep making a more inclusive place. So, I mean, all those things make me personally feel like it's a great place to work.
I think the great thing about the ally programs as well is that they really do enable allies to become part of our ERGs, to get connected without necessarily relying on members of those communities to be the ones providing that education. So a lot of people come to allyship because it feels like the right thing to do, but they really don't know they don't know what to say. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. And there's a whole spectrum and journey that goes from that to being able to take action in your own way. And our allyship programs, Pride is one of them, but we have several. We have a mental health ally program as well, just as another example. And they really do kind of provide kind of a structured place where people can go for information and to kind of build that muscle and that skill themselves and to be able to be effective allies. So I think it does. And it's great to hear, Pat, from your point of view that they have a positive impact, because I think I certainly have found them helpful myself.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like also for us as well, like I know that with all the activities and the programming we were doing for the Black community, as soon as I saw one of my project members on those calls, it immediately just gave me this sense of relief in knowing that the folks that I will spend 8 hours a day with, if not more, are really serious about ensuring that my well-being is a priority to them and that I even baseline, just feel comfortable in my organization. So yeah, Pat, I completely agree. It just does so many things subconsciously for you to really make you feel like you'll be okay and you'll be supported.
Wow, there's so much to say about that. I mean, it's not that you say bring your whole self to work. Is you say bring your whole self to work because you are valued here, and we support all of those parts of you that make you special. Wow, that is a whole different level. I mean, people will feel like family. Why would they ever want to leave you? Because they feel so welcomed in that environment. Wow, that's fantastic. Now, I want to make sure that our employers who are listening, might be small or medium-sized employers, don't just go away with the idea that that's Accenture. They're ginormous. They can do this well. Well, what advice would you give to small and medium-sized employers if they wanted to start off an inclusion initiative in their workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's true. You know, we've got 500,000 people around the world. In Canada, we're close to 5,000 people. It's a big company, and it means that we have kind of scope and to do big things. We can have 12 ERGs, we can do in Canada, that kind of thing. But I think in principle, the idea that an inclusive work environment, a culture where people feel like they are welcome and are able to really, that they belong themselves as they are and are able to bring everything that they have and their unique experiences to the job. I don't think that is any different for a small or medium-sized business as it is for a big company like ours. And I think a place to start is to really talk to your people and find out how they do feel. And depending on the size of your organization, that might be a survey, it might be a one-on-one coffee talk, but understanding where your people are at and how they really do feel about the organization. And that's trust, right? That requires in and of itself, to get good information requires an element of trust, which is in itself a piece of culture. So I think it is as relevant for a large global corporation as it is for a small local one. I think that when I think about the success factors that we tend to tie back our work to, I think all of those probably apply as well, regardless of the size of your organization. It's just the scale of what you're trying to do. So thinking about that, I talked about it earlier, but a visible commitment from your leadership, that this is not something that is just a chat that someone's having or a nice idea, but actually something that your organization is committed to. So, Gwenna mentioned some of the conversations we had in Canada around racial justice over the summer. And those were all like open conversations for our people, but they were hosted by our president of Accenture Canada and our inclusion and diversity sponsor, right? These were come share what's going on with you and be listened to by your leaders, right? So I think having that sponsorship is incredibly important, because that's what drives it down through an organization, regardless of size. I think also that sponsorship, the other piece that's connected to that, is making it a real business priority for your organization. So again, this not thinking about it as kind of a nice thing to do, but rather something that is actually going to make your business stronger. It's a business decision to prioritize inclusion and diversity, and to communicate that down through your organization, especially I think to more of your frontline managers and people who are working on the ground, of why we're doing this and how it connects back to our business priorities, I think is really important. I think it's also important then, like any strategic business priority, you put metrics against that to track, right? And so depending on your organization, those metrics could look very different, but identifying how are you actually going to hold yourself accountable to what you say you're going to do, and who is accountable, and how are you going to hold them visibly accountable for that?
I completely agree. And I think we often hear in this space, we can't find diverse talent, or we can't find diverse talent in specialized areas like technology. So I think there is some acknowledgements that we need to make as organizations that the problem is complex and it's really high level, it's twofold. So there are some candidates from underrepresented groups that, due to privilege and conscious and unconscious bias, may not have had what companies have deemed the perfect resume or the perfect work experience that they may have traditionally looked for. And then as a result, they're facing unemployment or underemployment. And then secondly, there are candidates that are from those underrepresented groups who do possess those qualifications, but they might not simply exist in the numbers or the volume in the market that you might be looking for. So they can be extremely competitive to recruit. Women in STEM as a the classic example. And once we acknowledge the why, we see the problem goes full circle, as those individuals might not have had the same privilege or access to gain the required skills, and the problem, it moves in a circular fashion. So I think from a recruitment standpoint, as an organization, and you're kind of trying to look to solution for that, there's sort of two approaches to those two issues. One, rethinking how, as an organization, you look at candidates and resumes and you interpret that work experience, and you're looking at it from a strengths-based angle in a more innovative way than might have been traditional. And then secondly, looking at your organization and how you market yourself externally to attract those diverse candidates who do exist in the market but might exist in few numbers. So I'd really encourage other organizations who may be faced with that recruitment challenge to really look at the systemic source of the issues and the barriers to entry and really start there. So some tactical things can be looking at job description requirements. Are they too cumbersome? Have you really considered whether what you have listed is a true indicator of success for that position? Have you explored more objective ways of measuring rather than just reading a resume? So there's some great testing and digital tools out there that can help support that. And then there's obviously the issue of, diverse talent might not be applying to your organization, and why is that? So, tied back to the second point, are you actively speaking up as an organization about the inclusion work that you're doing? Are you fostering an inclusive workforce by not just listening? The listening part is important, but taking the action after and sharing what that action is. And it'll be iterative. You'll make mistakes and you'll need to better your solutions over time as you learn more. That's this, Emily said, journey. It is this journey of learning and unlearning and continually bettering. And then I think one important thing too is, are you giving back to those underrepresented communities? Are you providing opportunities to upskill? So I think one sort of tangible example we could share is we run an apprenticeship program at Accenture where we partner with nonprofit organizations, and we identify talent to come into our primarily technology pathways. And we kind of designed this program to create opportunities with the flexibility in the job requirements to really open up access to careers in technology. So you might see candidates from what you would consider non-traditional backgrounds. I hope in future years we won't even have to kind of use this terminology. But candidates who might not have a traditional degree or a diploma, but have some really great practical work experience. And the program's really designed for those candidates to come in and to upskill, and for us to offer the training to start those career paths and kind of work towards reducing some of the privilege that we know exists in our recruiting process.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, Rosie, you got into a question I had about companies who say, like, we just can't find diverse talent, right? And so you spoke so well about that, because there are different ways of articulating that you are welcoming of all kinds of backgrounds, as long as people have the talents that are lining up, not just the paper on the wall that says, you got a degree. And so we're seeing a move from many companies, great ones, that are saying, we've seen that the degree isn't so important as much as the things that you have to offer in terms of talent and the way you think, your creativity, and all of those things are really important. I've seen a company look at newcomer resumes, and in the past they admitted that they were looking at those resumes and saying, well, they don't have Canadian experience. Then they got a new HR person, and then new HR person did the research and looked at the universities that were on those resumes and were blown away by the caliber of work that university produces, and therefore those candidates and what they bring to the table. So just a different way of looking at things, right? Another company said couldn't find women in finance, and so introduced them to a bunch of women organizations, and in a couple of months had 100 people in the workforce, new women in the workforce in finance. And again, just looking at that from that perspective. Emily, you keep coming back to the point about the business need, and skill shortage is definitely one. And so the apprenticeship program really speaks to that, in creating a pipeline that's non-traditional, not a way that you typically recruit at the campus, right? But you're going to be able to get people who just need a little bit of a bridge to get them there, and you're going to be able to benefit as an employer from all of the different things you never thought about and what they're bringing to the table now. So fantastic conversation. A couple more questions before we go. Just again, in terms of small businesses, if they said to us, especially coming out of COVID, we know that employers were hit really hard. And one of the biggest challenges and worry for me is that all of the advances we've made in diversity over the number of years, when financial hardships come, how easily those advances can be, sort of depleted. And so how do we keep diversity as, at the as a top priority for us? So what do we say to employers who say, I can't afford to make diversity and inclusion a priority? I'm going to hire the person in front of me who offers the best. What would you say to them?
Really just from the perspective of what we're already doing internally as an employee resource group. Confidently, some of the best programming that we've had that has resulted in our employees and our people just feeling like they can bring their full selves and bring in that innovation and those collaborative ideas and really be genuine at work, which overall has its own business impact, have cost us absolutely nothing. The open forums that we were talking about, nothing. It's a matter of getting an hour of time in some of our senior leaders' calendars, sending out a Teams invite, and just inviting people to chat, have their experiences be validated, give them the space to feel like they're really being heard. That goes so far. Something that we really found too, and this seems like it is a large organization thing, but I think it applies across the board, is that feeling of not really knowing your peers. And what we're really prioritizing, because our Black population is so dispersed across Canada, is just building those points where folks can get to know each other and know that they have individuals who look like them or allies who are there to support them, that get them and allow them to bring more than just their work selves, but also just give a sense of who they are individually. And so I really caution against that mentality of, oh, it's too expensive, it's not worth it. Because there's just so many ways, if you think about it, from one, what are your employees specifically asking for and what do they need, which is so important from that data perspective that Emily has given. And two, just make sure that you're actually being creative about it, because you can see your list of top 10 diversity initiatives online, but that might not be the specific thing that will really resonate with your folks. You just have to talk to them.
I completely agree with the some of the great things we've done that have been free this year as well. And some of the observations I've made in those open doors listening sessions were an ask from our people for some behavior changes too. And those things are, they come from within. They're not, external vendors that you need to pay. It's really, small changes that you can make in your language or in your behavior, in your inclusion on a project or in whatever kind of work environment you're in to make everybody feel included. And that is absolutely free.
I think it doesn't cost money to be more human.
Yeah.
And I think, and ultimately,
Exactly.
I think that's what we're all trying, what we're talking about, right? When we talk about inclusion, when we talk about creating a space where people feel that they belong, it's not only ourselves, and especially as leaders, being more human, and that kind of creates a culture in which everyone is better able to be themselves. But I also recognize that in times of stress and in times of challenge, it's really easy. Our natural instinct is to go back to our inherent unconscious biases, the things that have served us, that we feel have served us in the past, and can kind of go what is just sort of that natural, safe route. And I think that I'm probably repeating myself a bit, but I do think that, when I recommend kind of setting up, thinking about inclusion and diversity as a strategic business priority, and really understanding what the business case is for your business around diversity and inclusion, and creating that culture in your organization, then it is easier, I think, than to not abandon that in a time of challenge, right? Because if it's a strategic business priority, it is one of the things that you are doing in your business to grow your business, to be successful. And it's not as simple as just an engagement activity that we might not want to do anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the cost of turnover, that alone in itself, right? But the opportunity for new markets. I mean, the list just goes on and on. But it is also the human thing. And the thing is that when we create an environment that's inclusive for one group, it makes it inclusive for everyone. And it makes the environment so much better, right? Mm-hmm. So fantastic. Okay, so I think, Rosie, this is going to be for you. And of course, anyone else jump in. But, we have a lot of job seekers listening to us. And I mean, we see about 15,000 job seekers a year. And so what would you like them to know about Accenture as an employer, and maybe from a recruiter's lens?
I think one thing that came to mind as we were speaking earlier is around this idea of culture fit too. We don't use the term culture fit at Accenture because it is not needed. We should be thinking more creatively about recruiting people from different areas, skill sets, backgrounds. We know that diversity fosters innovation. So when people say culture fit, what they're really saying is this is not the typical person that we'd hire. And it was Emily that kind of shared this line before, but it really stuck with me that statement in itself is actually the strength in your organization. That comment that people use as a challenge to not recruit diverse candidates is really what is going to strengthen your organization. So I think with that, we would just want to share with anyone listening that we do have opportunities for everybody at Accenture, and we welcome all kinds of applicants, and not to be scared by a job application, as we can be, and especially as women we can be. Making sure that they know, we're open to meeting and talking with everybody, and we really value that in building our talent pipelines.
Well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, but I've also learned, and I now need to go and find my scribbles and sort them out from what I've learned today. But at the Career Foundation, it's a journey for us too. And we're looking to learn from people who have been doing it well, but also taking a very people-focused, human-centric approach to what we do. And that's who we've always been. But there are other things that we could do to make make it better for our people. And so we're hoping to continue this learning journey from folks like you. So I really want to thank you so much for spending the afternoon with me talking about this really important topic. And how we make lives easier for people. And if we don't talk about it and have hard conversations, we're never going to get to a place of equity and fairness in our future. So thank you so much for talking with me. I appreciate you so much. And we will continue to stay in touch and learn from Accenture. And certainly we encourage job seekers to check out Accenture opportunities because they are clearly a fantastic company to work for. So thank you, ladies. As I wrap up, I just want to remind our listeners that this is just part one of an equity series. We're going to have two others, one focused primarily on women and the economic recovery for women, and also looking at disability inclusion and why the unemployment rate for people with disabilities continue to be so low, and looking to talk to employers about what they're doing well. Accenture, I'm sure, could be one of those employers, about what they're doing well to support people with disabilities in the workplace to grow in their careers. And so that will be the third part of our equity series. And so again, I want to thank you. We'll look forward to continue this conversation, and we will be in touch very soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Career Foundation's Future at Work podcast and web series. To learn more about our workforce development initiatives, visit our website at www.careerfoundation.com and follow us on social media. To listen to our previous episodes, subscribe to the Future at Work podcast on iTunes or Spotify.